Actually, that's considering even today on a day-to-day lives, let's say we make it to Mars and we try to keep the supply running, keep up to date with the technology. Is that something that's really factored into that involves in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let you speak to this because he's a big thinker.
Initially, when you have maybe up to 100 people on Mars, you'll need some kind of supply chain from Earth. But almost immediately, you have to start relying on everything you can find on Mars to live on Mars, because it just costs too much to bring it from Earth, and you can only get it there once every 2 years when the two planets are aligned in the right place. So, and NASA is very good at keeping people alive in hostile environments, and they have very much taken on this concept just a couple of years ago that everything we do on Mars to keep people alive on Mars, we have to find on Mars. The only exception to that will probably be food. We'll probably ship somewhere between 80 and 90% of the colonists' food from Earth to Mars for probably maybe even up to 100 years before, because you have to warm the planet and terraform it and be able to actually plant crops outdoors instead of in greenhouses before you can really become sustainable from a food point of view.
But to go to the technology question, one of the things that you had said at an earlier table is that it's not set so far ahead in the future. The show is set, we jumped 5 years into season 2, so we were in 2042. But Stephen was saying earlier that a lot of this, we know so much now from a technological point of view what we would need to live there on Mars. And so it isn't a huge stretch. So that was the one thing that actually attracted. One of the things
it's not a stretch
at all. It's not science fiction. It's actually kind of a science that's sort of based in a level of reality that makes it credible. It isn't just, lasers.
Whatever's needed, or is the idea whatever works there is a baseline?
I think it's a combination of both, because we're having more people come out and more equipment come out. By the time we get into season 2, they've been there 9 years. So there's a fair amount of stuff that's and if you buy into the idea, which I don't know if you bought into the idea, but I bought into the idea that while 2 years to get the 2 year process of getting humans there, because you want the shortest possible distance, we could have unmanned ships going with materials and stuff that don't have to go as quickly necessarily. So
that is true, and it would be cheaper to do that.
Yeah.
There probably will be a lot of unmanned supply ships going back and forth, or going back. They will be reusable, and they will be going back and forth. They will be refueled on Mars with fuel that is made on Mars to send them back. But by and large, almost from the get-go, what you have on Mars is what you get from Mars.
We talked a lot about the people, but in terms of the equipment and the things in the harsh environment, what are you doing in terms of the show to show it degrading, falling apart, the things that most likely happen? The first season was, they got there, it was pretty quick, more or less. Now you've got something that's been there 9 years.
Yeah. Well, they've added things more. And
right, but the older stuff also, this is 5 years old. It's gonna,
Yeah, well, one of the things we
life.
did to sort of highlight the differences, there's 2 colonies on Mars at the beginning of season 2. One is this new colony that's come from a lot of money from a privately funded, profit-driven company. And then there's our scientists, and they don't have quite as much money. So while they have expanded, there's no longer sort of the money chain to keep them building. So, you see in the background somebody working on stuff, and in terms of showing wear and tear, it's not so much that as much as they've tried to make it as Earth-like as possible because they've been there so long. But then we go to the other colony, and they have 1,000 more bells and whistles. They're shiny new, and they have all the this stuff. And there's technological differences between. Actually, it was crazy making the script process because they have holograms, we don't. This is the, you have to kind of in your mind, though this is the pop-up screen. It's kind of crazy to me, but the other colony we're saying has a lot more of the advances, just in terms of communication stuff more than anything else, and equipment, because they're there for a different purpose. So they're there to mine resources, and our scientists they're there to take samples and study and terraform.
Given the I'm sorry, you look like you're about to say.
No, it's okay.
It's more important that you talk than I talk. Did you?
Well, I was just going to say that you're going to build things entirely differently on Mars. You're not going to build anything like these recording devices here that are obviously have some kind of obsolescence. From the get-go, when you start manufacturing something on Mars, you're going to think it through as to what its lifetime is, and you probably try to maximize its lifetime. And then when its lifetime is over, what are you going to do with it? Because you're going to have to recycle everything on Mars, 100%. Because it's just too costly not to do that. It won't be a garbage. You can't use.
It's not even about polluting.
You can't use the atmosphere as your garbage disposal device, and you can't use the planet as your garbage disposal device like we do on Earth. So everything is going to be much more precious and worth much more.
Then, and I don't mean to be gross, but you've twice now in season 1 and in season 2 taken a body, buried a body. Why not recycle the body? Why not reuse the body? Why take the energy to terraform Mars to dig a grave? When
energy is not a significant problem on Mars, and humans have 60,000 years of burial rituals.
Okay.
And those are not going to be undone very easily, even in an environment like Mars, where whether or not you bury a body or even preserve a body indefinitely on Mars so that you could at some point take it back to Earth or whatever, as opposed to, for example, incinerating it, really isn't going to matter that much. And in fact, burial might be scientifically the smartest thing to do.
How so?
Well, because if you were to incinerate the body, for example, what do you do with all the exhaust gas? Are you going to release it into the atmosphere? That's a pollutant. It's not a wise idea. So Mars is so cold that it is literally like, what we imagine Walt Disney is someplace,
Cryo.
perpetually frozen somewhere. And you're not going to run out of space for that on Mars either.
It's good fertilizer too. So given the state of the clash, you address this in season 2, the clash of commercialism versus science. Can we in real life learn from the mistakes that business is making now, successes, and apply that, or are we just going to continue? This is for real space exploration, or is it just going to continue as is and it's going to replicate?
We're so different. I think I would like to believe. At the end of this, I think there's hope. This season to me is about this clash, and are we doomed to repeat the same mistakes? It's sort of the battle for the soul of Mars, and are we just going to sort of succumb to some of the stuff that we've seen happen on Earth that we've botched in many ways? And I would like to think that somehow that we could find our way to the other side of that and have some sort of... Because science and industry actually do go hand in hand. You kind of can't have one without the other. So if you find that balance, is there some hope so that we don't just do the same crap that we've done all along?
I saw your presentation that you did.
Stephen was going to answer that question.
You can't afford to screw up on Mars. If you do, everybody dies. You can't afford many mistakes on Mars, at least initially, until you've built a city of maybe 50,000 people. Then you can start to afford some mistakes and have some problems occur. So there will have to be cooperation between industry and science on Mars. I mean, we already have a little bit of a war going on Earth about that. There's a group of scientists who feel very strongly that we should not even colonize Mars in any way. That the risks of destroying what is essentially a scientific park are too great. And those risks, like many other risks that we've encountered in our society since people became relatively smart, they're going to be run over. We're going to Mars. And we've already made a lot of mistakes. I mean, NASA supposedly cleaned every satellite and every lander that had sent to Mars, so there were no microbes on it. And then we find out after we sent them, oops, there were microbes in the clean room. So and we know they can survive space travel. So we're kind of messy wherever we go. We take our biology with us, and we're going to take our biology with us to Mars. But I think we're going to be a lot smarter on Mars than we have been on Earth, because survival depends on it. You can't just have commercial interests pursuing purely commercial interests the way we allow that to happen on Earth. And again, when you are forced to recycle everything, it completely changes the attitude of how people have to cooperate with each other, whether they're scientists or industry barons.
I was going to say that I saw your presentation for season 1 and at the NatGeo party, and one of the things that was interesting to me is that we actually have to change the way we think.
Yes.
That we're not, like you said, you can't bring cows to Mars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody on Mars will be a vegetarian.
Yeah.
And there just won't be any choice. If, you can't afford to feed 7 pounds of grain that you could eat and would be nourishing to an animal to digest it and then produce 1 pound of meat, which has, less good biology for you in it. So.
Maybe estimated how is gravity going to impact human body, and if people are going to reproduce there, how is that going to affect human anatomy?
Probably people born on Mars will, because they will be encountering a much lower gravity environment where it's only about 40% of the gravity on Earth, will probably not be nearly as strong as people on Earth. They may not have the same lung capacity. It may be actually difficult for people 2 or 3 generations down the road to visit Earth. They wouldn't be able to deal with the severe gravity here, and they probably would not. They would have some problems breathing the mix of air that we have here compared to what they will be breathing on Mars.
You said no cows, and you were joking in the panel about dogs, or a dog being on Mars. I don't know if you were joking. Maybe there is a dog on Mars. There is a dog there.
Yeah, but not for eating purposes.
Right, obviously. So what's the justification if you have to pay, as you said at the panel?
The psychology of the people that are there, and the intense claustrophobic world that they're living in, and it was just sort of a way of keeping people from losing their minds and just being really, I just think it was, our idea was like, what would we need to kind of keep in touch with our humanity, with our sort of, what could keep us real? And it would be, well, booze, and like something tangible, it was just having a pet, and what that value that brings to people. It's like prisoners, right? Or people like you, it does something to kind of keep them centered in a way. So that was the thought process about it.
What kind of dog?
It's a mutt. It's a mutt.
There was an experiment with Hawaii with the dog that the scientists were in, and they didn't make it. So do you think there's a chance for humans to make it there?
Well, they made it through the year. They just didn't make it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's possible. I think that it's obviously fraught. I think it would be very challenging for anybody, but I think the desire is there, and I think that it's going to happen. Maybe they didn't, but maybe by some. I think that there are going to be people that can make that happen.
That experiment, which is called High Seas, they've run probably 10 groups of people through that, and all of them except one has made it. So it probably is a kind of a good reflection on what human nature is really like, which is that, put 100 people through that experiment, and one group of 10 doesn't quite make it, but the other 90 do. That sounds kind of like human nature, that there are always going to be some people that are more problematic than other people.
As the showrunner, do you pay attention to things like High Seas or the Mars Desert Research Station?
Oh yeah, we looked at a lot of that stuff.
And what do you bring? What insights do you bring from that? What we'll see in the story.
Well, I mean, more in sort of like stuff the things that we saw that were our fascination that didn't end up being on the air, like how do they go to the bathroom, how do they shower, those kinds of things. But it's like I have very limited storytelling time on the show, so I don't really want to spend it on that. But but it was like looking at how they interacted, how well they just sort of retreat to their little domes at the end of the day. So you look at all that stuff and just cull bits and pieces from it, and just sort of infuse it. It wasn't like I took any one thing specifically, but it was just like just seeing how human. My interest in it is those characters and how they were going to survive this, and how they felt, and how are they losing their humanity? Are they missing Earth? Because I just took my own fears. I would hate never feeling the wind on my face, or just think like that's just off the table. It's not happening anymore. Some people can take it and they're fine.
I could get you a fan.
That's not the same thing. And and other people can't.
Well, atmosphere is the biggest problem about living on Mars. We can solve almost all the problems in terraforming Mars and making it very Earth-like, with even trees and grass growing and flowing rivers and a temperature environment that's kind of like British Columbia. Those are not huge problems except from a money point of view. It takes a lot of money to do it. But there is one huge problem that's very difficult to solve on Mars, which is making the atmosphere breathable. So on Earth, we breathe 78% an inert gas, nitrogen. Goes in, does nothing, goes out. The good part is the 22% oxygen we breathe. You go up to 24% oxygen, and fires don't. When you start a fire, it never goes out, or your lungs burn up because the oxygen is actually burning your lungs. You go down to 18% oxygen, and you turn blue, and you start to go to sleep and die. So the range of oxygen that humans can tolerate and the amount of inert gas that they need and that mix is absolutely critical. And it is conceivable to imagine manufacturing plants on Mars that create gases in the right mix that we can breathe. But it's going to take an awful long time and an awful lot of money to do that. My guess is we will have moved on to a more Earth-like planet long before we establish a breathable atmosphere on Mars.
So does the breathing the same ratio?
Well, you would when you're indoors. I mean, that would be all managed very easily indoors. You'd be breathing nitrogen and oxygen in the same mix you do on Earth, but not when you go outdoors. And then the idea eventually of terraforming Mars is that you get to go outdoors and spend your life outdoors just like you do on Earth.
Right. With the radiation issue being mitigated
By much
atmosphere.
thicker atmosphere, but not one you can breathe.
I have one last question for you. At the end of season 2, what do you hope viewers walk away thinking and feeling?
Good question.
Hope.
Just hope?
Just hope. For us. In a very bleak time. Yes, I think that's what we come away with.
And you have some plans for season 3 already?
There's always plans for season 3 back here, but it's not going to come out until we know there is a season 3.
How about you, Stephen?
How about what?
At the end of the season, since you seem to...
Oh, well, what I hope for is that people's consciousness is raised that we are going to Mars. There are going to be tens of thousands of people on Mars, that some of your children are going to end up living on Mars, and that there's more of an acceptance in the world of this as a reality and a necessity. And I think I think The Martian helped tremendously in convincing all of us that, oh yeah, maybe we really could go to Mars. Before The Martian, when I would give talks and say, we're going to Mars and people are going to be on Mars in 10 or 15 years, people would be like, what, are you kidding? The Martian comes out, which has some factual questions in it, and all of a sudden everybody believes, yeah, we could do that, we could build that thing and we could go to Mars. And in fact we can, and we could have for the last 40 years if we had chosen to. We could have been on Mars in the 1980s if we had wanted to. So I hope that people come away with an understanding that this is real and that it's going to happen and that it's exciting and that it is cause for hope.